So, I'm very blessed to be the father of three lovely boys, but there is a point as a parent that you really dread currently. It sometimes can go months without this happening. Sometimes it's weeks, sometimes it's days, but it's something that I do worry about, and it can occur, and what will happen is it's often at the worst possible time, usually in the morning for me, but I'll turn around to my boys and I'll say, George, what do you want for breakfast? George, what do you want for breakfast? No, just tell me, I need to know. Just tell me, I need to know. And suddenly I've engaged in a game of parrot. And the problem with this game I've noticed is the more frustrated I get, the more hilarious it is for them. So, I just need to know. Just stop saying that same thing to me. Just stop saying that same thing to me. And this is what they do, and they find it really hilarious to parrot and to copy me. But what I've noticed actually is this is actually a pretty common thing in children. They like to copy what they see. They see things. As they're learning, as they're growing older, they copy. They look at what's going on around them and they copy it. Now, as a parent, there's a huge risk here, and you have to be very careful, because I guarantee you, if you ever do something you don't want them to copy, they will remember that at the top of their list. So you have to be very cautious. But what I'm really interested in is like how my kids interact with each other. And I've noticed mostly, and this happens, is my eldest George, my littlest Joe, he wants to copy. He wants to be like his big brother. You know, he's 4, George is 10, and he kind of looks up to him as, I want to be like that. So I've noticed this, and this actually trips him up quite regularly, because I will say to George, what do you want to drink? And he'll say, a drink, and then I'll turn around to Joe, and he'll choose the same thing. And if I say, what do you want to eat? He'll choose the same thing. But the problem is, they don't like the same things. So this often doesn't go well, because he then is sitting there with a drink and food that he doesn't really like because he's copied his big brother. So I often be like, I don't really think you want that, do you? How about we go for this? Oh, but I want... I've learnt a trick, which is to ask him first. Joe, what are you going to have? Well, what's George having? And I said, well, I don't know yet, so let's go with what you want first. But actually, this whole copying thing and mirroring things, actually, we all do this. And actually, as we get older, we often look to, if we're in situations where we don't feel very comfortable, we go, well, what's everyone else doing? And I remember specifically, so this is as being a very young Christian. I remember when I first started coming along to church, I was quite young, and I remember being in a time of worship, and it was a youth group. They were I think between the age of about 11 to 14, and it was mostly boys actually. It was a group that I used to go to, and there was a time of worship, and I hadn't really been to many times of worship, and people were worshiping, and a load of them started putting their hands up in the air, and I was like, yeah, I'm doing it the same as everybody else, yeah. But I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just like, I've got to kind of fit in. I've got to do what other people are doing. And actually, do you know, as Christians, we can look around us at other people and say, look, what are other people doing? And actually, it's not necessarily a bad thing, because often other people are doing really good things. But actually, we can be looking at the wrong behaviours. And actually, I really want to encourage you this morning that we're really, really fortunate, though, that we have one example of someone that, if we copy them, we can't go wrong, and that's Jesus. So we're going to continue this morning on our series on the kingdom, and we're specifically looking at the kingdom and those in need. Matt set us up really well last week, where he was talking about kingdom in society, and he looked at, in specifically Micah 6, where it said to act justly, to love mercy, to walk humbly with your God. And that was sort of that direction of our attitude, of where our attitude needs to be. And I want to continue that journey this morning to look at actually how does Jesus call us to live out those values? If that's our attitude, what does it look like to live that attitude? So we're going to look at Matthew 25, and it's verse 31 to 46. Now, this passage is part of Jesus' teaching specifically on the kingdom of God, and it was in the final days of his earthly ministry. In these chapters, Jesus is discussing the signs of the end times. When we talk about end times, it's like when he comes back on his return, and the need for vigilance of how people are waiting for his return. So I'm just going to read the passage to start off. So Matthew 25. So when the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, he will sit on his glorious throne. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate all the people, one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from goats. He will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on the right, 'Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I need clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me.' Then the righteous will answer, 'Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go and visit you?' And the king will reply, 'Truly, I tell you, whatever you did for the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me.' Then he will say to those on his left, 'Depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For when I was hungry, you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, you did not invite me in. I needed clothes, you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, and you did not look after me.' They will answer, 'Lord, when did we see you hungry, thirsty, or a stranger, or needing clothes, or sick, or in prison, and did not help you?' He will reply, 'Truly, I tell you, whatever you did not do for the least of these, you did not do for me.' Then they will go away to eternal punishment, but the righteous to eternal life." So Jesus gives a very vivid description there of what will happen when he returns. It's very specific. And also, it's like Keith shared, that verse he shared, he was talking about him returning and the holiness of like the elders falling down on their knees, crying, "Holy, holy." And this is what this picture is of Jesus returning as a king. And he's this glorious, the nations are gathered before him. It's a really amazing picture. And then him saying that he's going to separate them as a shepherd separates the sheep from goats. And then he's saying to them, the goats are people who have not, they failed to show compassion or act justly. So if we look at verse 31, he says, "When the Son of Man comes in his glory," this is reference to that second coming, "and he will return in power and majesty to establish his reign." So this is literally what he's saying. This is when he comes back. The imagery of glory, all the angels, it's a grand event. You can picture this isn't just sort of in the backdrop, somebody turning up in a coffee shop and a few people hanging out. This is a huge, grand event. And then in verse 32 and 33, it's saying all the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate them into these two groups. So the goats and sheep separated. And the sheep onto the right and the goats on the left. And he's basically symbolizing his favor and his disfavor. And the criteria for this judgment is based on compassion and service. So Jesus, the king, Jesus in this situation, tells those on the right, the righteous, the sheep, that they are blessed because they have shown love and compassion in practical ways. And the passage specifically lists 6 acts of mercy. It's talking about feeding the hungry, giving drink to the thirsty, welcoming a stranger, clothing the naked, visiting the sick, and visiting those in prison. But these acts aren't presented as optional. These are essential evidence of a life transformed by God's love. So it's evidence of someone who's transformed. And Jesus emphasized that these acts were done to him personally. And this is really interesting because he's actually highlighting this deep connection of when we serve others, we're actually serving Jesus. And that's a really big picture. It's like saying, it's like when you choose to serve others, you're actually serving him. When you do that good thing to someone and are kind to that person, you're being kind to Jesus. And that's a really interesting thing that he brings out specifically. And you can see that they're struggling with it. Because, he says to him, "Truly, as I say to you, as you did to the least of these brothers, you do it to me." And it's that heart of the passage as he identifies with those people who are suffering, those outcasts. And he's serving the least in our community. By serving the least in our community, it's equivalent to serving Jesus. And then again, it says that those sheep were the people who were showing that love to others, especially those who can't repay them. And that's the thing, I think, when you talk about the least of them, it's people who can't give back. It's not that you are serving someone knowing that they were going to give back. It's actually just wholehearted service to someone who can't. But then obviously there's the bit that's a bit uncomfortable. He's saying, there's in verse 41 and 45, the contrast to what the sheep get is the goats. These people who, on his left, are condemned for failing to show compassion to those people who are hungry, thirsty, the strangers, the sick and the imprisoned. And they ask, well, how have we failed to do this for you? Their focus is, how have we failed to do this for you? And again, he says, it's because you didn't look at the least of these. And again, he's kind of having to change their thinking round. And really important here, this rejection is not based on doctrinal beliefs or anything to do with the way. It's specifically about their acts of love. That's what he's saying here in this situation. And it's saying that mercy towards others. The wicked people didn't demonstrate the love of Christ. And he makes it clear there is no neutral ground. There's not a third category. There is those who are blessed and those who are not, which is a real challenge. So I want to just look at, and I've got these up here. So what does this living righteously look like? So it's a breakdown of these six areas. So feeding the hungry, giving drink to the thirsty, welcoming the stranger, clothing the naked, visiting the sick, and visiting those in prison. And again, it's that highlight of doing these things for people is doing it for Jesus. Now, I want to just put a really important point here. And we need to ensure our mindset is correct in this. Because I'm not saying, don't hear what I'm not saying here. I'm not saying if you don't do works, you're not earning your place in the kingdom. And this is really interesting. It's like, because there are the two parts, and we kind of walk this tightrope of, we are told, actually, when we give our faith to Jesus, we say we love you and we choose to follow him, it's done. Matt said done the other week. It's done. But actually what this is, it's showing the outpouring of that done. If we've chosen to wholeheartedly follow Jesus, it changes us. It changes our attitude. It changes the way we look at things. So it's not, and it's really important here, it's not a faith based on works. It's not, well, if you do enough good works, then you go to the kingdom of heaven. Because if you do, you've got to earn enough points. Actually, no, he's done it all. But he's saying, actually, did you really believe in me? Did you really have a heart for me? Because actually, if you did, this is how you would be. This will be your character. This will be the way you act. And as I say, the big thing on this is this amazing challenge of him identifying himself, and for us to then look at those people who are poor, who are marginalized, who are suffering, as we look upon Jesus, and to love them in a very direct way to serve him. And because if we're loving him and we're directing our love to those in need, it's a faith that's lived out in action. And it's something where people see it. When we do, as a church, there are a number of ministries we're involved in. It's the people who are ministered to it, we want to tell them about Jesus first and foremost, but we do want to meet some of their practical needs first. So I've just got a list here. If I go to share this, it's like, how do we, as a church, meet some of these? So there's some really obvious examples here. So people who are hungry and thirsty, the really obvious one here is food bank. We as a church, this is one of our big ministries, we run a food bank. And this meets a very practical need of people who are hungry and thirsty. They're struggling to make ends meet. They're suffering in a way that they cannot get enough food, and we're supplying that need. And that is a specific need. And if you've been part of the teams that serve the food bank, you will know that those people who come to the people who come to the food bank are people who are in desperate need. They are desperate. That's the point. And there's a big thing with food bank. It's one of the things that I know, talking to the teams, that one of the hardest things is to get somebody through the door the first time, because people are really proud, actually, and they say, well, I don't want help, I'm going to sort it out myself. But actually, it's usually the point they do come is when they're actually on their knees and they're like, I can't cope on my own, I need help. They are the least of these, somebody who desperately needs support, and we want to love them. And again, it's that thing of like, what are we doing? We're loving that person because we're saying, actually, we're serving that as if they're Jesus. We're loving them and giving to them. Now, we don't step and say, just have the food. We do want to tell them about Jesus as well. And this is the really important thing of that. We want to say, why are we doing this? We are doing it because we love you. But the reason we love you is because we love Jesus. And it's kind of sharing that picture. The other one, the next one is like the welcoming the stranger. And I think if you've ever been into Revive, they're one of the things we talk about Revive being a home from home. When we first started this coffee shop, the big thing that happened was there were people who came in and have become regulars because of the welcome. I'm sure the cake's great, Helen. The cake's amazing. The coffee's good, but it's the welcome that keeps people coming back. It's the fact that they feel like they belong here. They feel that they're welcomed in. And there are some people who probably were strangers. Perhaps they didn't know the town very well. They didn't know many people, and they come in now. There are groups of people who meet in Revive now who didn't know each other until they started coming here, and then now have become a friendship group. And that's that picture of that home for home, bringing people together. We've also got recently our baby toddler group relaunched Beacon Tots, and one of their real focuses was to slim down the numbers, but to specifically reach out to mums who didn't have anyone else, who didn't have any other support structure, and something where they can have somewhere that they feel safe, that they feel supported. So these are again, this is what is welcoming a stranger. That is somebody who is a stranger, somebody who doesn't know anybody at the end of the day. If you know everybody in a room, you're not a stranger. But when you walk into a room and you don't know people, we all know, we've all been in that position. It's not a great place to be. If you live in church, you've moved here from a long way away, you have no family, no friends, that's not a nice place to be. So that welcoming is what we can offer there. The clothing the naked. So obviously we've got Just a Helping Hand, which specifically caters and looks after people in a homeless situation and gives out clothes and provisions and things to help them in a very practical way. Now, the next two is obviously visiting the sick and visiting those in prison. Now, they're very specific, very specific to someone who's unwell and taking the time to go and visit them. But the last one, visiting those in prison, I was really caught with this, is actually, we sometimes will think of this verse and read it and think prison. Well, it's obvious, it's somebody who's in prison, behind bars, that's what it is. But when I was preparing this and preaching, I was actually, no, prisons don't have to be a cage. People can be trapped in their circumstances. Their prison could be their home. They can't get out. They can't leave their home. We have a neighbour down our road who he's very infirm and he can't get out of his home. He can't leave his home. He's at home all the time. So he's in a prison as such. And it also might be their circumstances. You may be in some people's circumstances, similar where we talked about those people who are coming along to Food Bank, their circumstances. Sometimes our circumstances can be what's almost trapped us in prison. It may be due to addiction. It may be due to family situations. It can be many, many things. And I think it's really good to open that prison out, to actually say it's people who are trapped. They're people who are confined, as it were, in their circumstances. And we can see people like this on a daily basis. I mean, I sat there and thought, have I ever visited somebody in prison? I haven't. I can honestly say I've not visited somebody in prison. But have I visited somebody or talked to someone that I believe was trapped in their situation? I have. And I could say, yes, that person. And their situation, when you meet someone who's in that, they're as trapped as somebody who's behind bars in a prison. They feel like they can't get out of that situation. So there's this real challenge in this passage of saying to us, are we living in such a way that when Christ returns, he will say to us, come, you are blessed by my Father, or are we being indifferent? Are we kind of like failing to recognize things around us? And actually, I really want to encourage the fact that we need to be really aware that again, talking about with our mindset in this, we need to not be in a mindset of, I'm not doing well enough, and kind of like being negative and saying, I'm not doing enough, I'm not. No, it's actually just have a mindset of opening your eyes to things around you and saying, actually, God, what do you want me to do? What is there around me that I could be that, serving you in? And I think that's a really good mindset to have, rather than that place of saying, I don't think I've done enough to earn my place in the kingdom. Again, we don't want that mindset. But it's saying, actually, no, just having that mindset to being open, of seeing those people around us and seeing their needs. Because, I was thinking about this, and we talk about our relationship with Jesus, and we say, if we have a relationship with him, we're saying we love him. And if you're in a relationship, if you've been married or in a relationship, one of the things you can do, if you ever do any courses, I've done a course before, one of the things they talk about is building communication is really important. But the other part is love languages. And they talk about this in a lot of marriage courses. And it's that actually everybody receives loves in different ways. Some people like gifts. Some people like affirmation. Some people like just time. There's loads of different ways you can receive it. And I was going back to my boys. I know that my boys, for me as a dad, to express my love to them, my 3 boys are very different. They're things that I know give mother. And I tested this. I wrote down what I thought their love language was, and I went to see them, and I asked them individually without telling them what I was asking them. And I was really happy because they all said the things I'd written down, which I was like, good, I'm doing it right. Now I'll share with you what their love language is. My eldest, football. That's his love language, football. It's that any time if I want to take him to the park, kick the ball around with him, kick the ball around in the house, don't tell Lizzie. But that's his love language, spending time with his dad playing football. That for him, that's what he likes. He said, and going for bike rides as well, Dad. I'd missed that one. But yeah, so he doing that. My middle one, Ben, his was, I said to him, is it just when we sit down together and you read to me or we read a book together? And he's like, yes, Daddy. And he likes one-to-one, just whether it's just sitting and being with, that's him, his time. He wants that time with you. But one-to-one, not interrupted by his brothers. That's what he wants. My littlest, it was very predictable, wrestling. That's what he loves. He loves to fight me. Literally the other week, I had him on my own, and I said, what do you want to do? Daddy, can we wrestle? Oh, okay, well, that's easy. That's not like let's go to, Chobham Adventure Farm or something. No, I just want to wrestle. That's what he wants to do. And that's his love language. He loves that. But each of them has a different thing. And actually, do you know what? If I got Ben, my middle one, and said to him, come on, let's go and play football down the park, he'd look at me and go, okay. Now, I know the reaction I would get from George if I said, let's go and read a book together, because he would be like, go away, Dad. But that's because they're all different. They receive that love they want from me. They want it in their different love languages. Now, we have this relationship with Jesus, and actually we're wanting to show our love, and part of our love is we worship him. But actually, Jesus' love language is represented in these verses. This is what he's saying shows our love. We're loving those people because we're loving Jesus. His love language is that we go out and love the poor. His love language is we feed the hungry, that we give drink to the thirsty, that we welcome the stranger. That's his love language. When we do that, he says, I know you love me because you're doing the things that I told you to do. And that's really interesting because I was really challenged by that, because actually I know that there are times in my relationships with my boys where I don't perhaps do those things as regularly. And I think, okay, then they're probably thinking I'm not loving them as much and not feeling as loved. And I sat there and I was challenged by that. I was saying, actually, again, if we're not doing those things, we're not showing that love we have for God, because we're not saying, Jesus, we want to be in that place of saying, where he replies, truly I tell you, whatever you did for the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. He's making it really clear this is what he wants from us. So, and it's really, again, I just want to say this again, is that when you have love for someone, I don't feel an obligation to do these things with my boys. It's like, I'm obliged to take him and play football. Actually, if I want to spend time and I have that relationship, I want to get him to be happy. I want to go and play football. And actually, it's not an obligation. It is expression of love, because I know that he'll have a big grin on his face. Or the same with Ben. If we sit next to each other, look up and he's happy. And actually, it's really important that, we have chosen to follow Jesus as our Lord and Saviour. And there are lives to show that we are following him. We've got to be marked with mercy, justice, compassion, living that kingdom values. He's laid out what his kingdom looks like, what his values are. And we want to be following in that road, living those values. And it's actually our absolute privilege to do these things. It's our privilege to live a life. So when we talk about the ministries we do, obviously, sometimes when we do these things, there is an effort, there is an investment on our part, whether it be time, whether it be, inconvenience, actually. Sometimes these things, but actually, do you know what? If I asked you now, to the people you love, is investing time in inconvenience a hassle? No. It's not. If it's somebody, and that's where we need to really get our mindset in this, of saying, and you know what, and I remember a long time ago, it's like someone saying to me, I worked at a place and I wasn't that happy there, and I wasn't particularly enjoying the work I was doing, and I was like, And remember someone saying to me, oh, but when you go to work, just pretend your boss is Jesus and work for him. And it kind of changed your mindset, because you're like, okay, if I'm working here and I'm working for Jesus, it changes where you're at, what your mindset is when you go to work, rather than that annoying bloke who isn't organised and not giving me the right work. No, I'm going to do the work. I'm going to pretend I'm working for Jesus. And it changes our mindset. I really want to encourage you this morning. This is what Jesus is asking us to do with this. You don't see a poor person who needs our charity, because that's not what he's asking. He's asking you to see that person as him and say, I want to love this person. I want to do the best for this person. I want to support them from where they are and bring them. And part of that passage, if we look at those areas there, all of this is, we are saying to that person, I want to feed you, we want to clothe you, but we also want to tell you about something. We want to tell you about the person who encourages us to do this. That we do this because of our faith. That we do this because we love Jesus. And actually that's so important, that we're bringing those two things together. And as I was preparing this particular word, I always try and pray and ask God and I really felt that one area that some people might really be struggling is that they're going, well, I don't think the quality of my service is very good. I look at other people and what they do is amazing and what I do is very little and it's not. And there was a discounting of saying, actually, what I can offer is not good enough. And having that mindset, there's actually, for that verse it says, for I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. The focus was the need. The verse does not say, for I was hungry and you prepared for me a bountiful feast. Or I was thirsty and you gave me a vintage wine. We're called to meet a need. And actually, you know, someone who is hungry, they're usually absolutely overjoyed with being given a sandwich because they're hungry. They just want to eat. Someone who is thirsty is happy with a bottle of water. Someone who's a stranger is just thrilled to talk to somebody. They're just thrilled to have company. And I really want to encourage you, if you're sitting there going, I don't feel what I have to offer is very good, that's a lie. To someone, what you have to offer will be amazing. And you offering that bit of time to someone, that love and care to someone, it makes a huge difference to them. And actually, we can ask God and say, where am I? And you can be in this place of saying, I know I sometimes pray and say, Lord, what do you want to use me for today? And he's saying, well, actually, I've kind of lined that out. It's in the verse, what I want to use you for. You need to open your eyes and see where it is around you. And actually, I want to encourage today for everyone to just reflect on saying, where can I be serving in my life? Who are the people who perhaps fit in some of these categories in your life, the situation you're in? You may realize that actually you've kind of overlooked and missed it, because it's easy to do. I know I do it all the time. I miss those people but actually if we stop and it's just slowing down and saying, Jesus, reveal it. Let me have my eyes changed to see it differently. So I do want to encourage you this morning as we this is a verse that's a challenge, because it's talking about this judgment of saying it's really important that we show that we love him. We're showing that we have been changed through his love and to serve in this way. And I really want to encourage you to just spend a moment and just to ask God. Two parts. One part is for him to highlight in you what you're doing that you don't even notice. And this is something that I think we sometimes do. You might not realize what you are doing to meet some people's needs. It might be a neighbor that you talk to regularly. It might be something very simple, but actually you're loving them. And Jesus is going, I want to really commend you for that. And I want to say that as you do. But equally, there might be situations where you're missing it. That person might have spoken to you about something and you might have been busy or whatever and moved on. But actually ask God to just highlight that on your heart of actually, is there an area where I need to step out and love that person because I want to love Jesus in them? So I'm going to wrap up there, but I want to just give you that opportunity to just rest and think about that. But I want people to be encouraged. This isn't a heavy burden, because actually, you know what? When you love somebody, you want to do things for them. And I want to encourage you to ask Jesus, how do you want to use me? because he wants to do this with you. He wants to partner with you. When as he said, you are serving me, but he's like waiting on the sidelines, watching, going, I want to be involved in this. I want to see these people loved, because that's what he did. If you look at his ministry, as I went to the beginning and I talked about the kids copy what they see. Well, actually, if we look through Jesus' life, his ministry, this is what he did. These are the things he did. He's not asking us to do something new. He's asking us to do what he did. So I just want to encourage you this morning just to take that moment to think about what you are doing and say, well, how can I do it more? How can I, really push through those situations, really love that person even more? And then also ask him, how else can you help? How else can you be involved in those areas of helping those people on the fringes of our communities? We have got a community out there, and there are many needy people. There are many people who are feeling separated from both the community. They might not even think about the church, but they don't even feel part of the community around them. But I just want to encourage you, we're just going to take a bit of time there just to rest in that.